The rain tapped gently against the windows, a soft, rhythmic reminder that the world outside kept moving, even when hers felt paused. Sarah sat alone at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup of tea, staring at the faint steam curling toward the ceiling. The house was quiet, too quiet, so different from the days when her son, Ethan, had filled every corner with laughter and chatter. She missed that sound more than she realized. She missed the mornings when he would burst into her room with a new question about the sky or the stars, demanding her attention before she had even finished her coffee. She missed the little victories and defeats he shared, big and small alike, that made her heart swell with pride. Now, those moments felt like echoes from another life. Distant and unreachable. Sarah sighed, brushing a strand of hair from her eyes. She loved her son more than anything in the world, but she could feel a growing distance between them. An invisible wall that neither of them had yet acknowledged. He was no longer the boy she could scoop up in her arms or scold gently for spilled milk. He was almost an adult now, navigating a life that didn't always include her. And she had to admit it hurt. She had tried to reach him in small ways, leaving notes on his pillow, suggesting movies to watch together, or asking about his day. Sometimes he responded, sometimes he didn't. Each unanswered message felt like a small fracture in their bond. And though she tried to hide it, it left a hollow ache inside her. She wondered if he even noticed how much she missed him, or if he was simply moving too fast through life to look back. Her eyes wandered to the photograph. On the mantelpiece, a younger Ethan, beaming as he held up a handmade science project. She remembered the way he had laughed that day, his eyes sparkling with excitement, and she felt a pang of longing. She wished she could reach back into those days just for a moment, to hear his laugh again and feel the closeness they once shared. The clock ticked on, and Sarah's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a key turning in the lock. Her heart skipped a beat, a mixture of hope and nervous anticipation rising in her chest. She had no idea who it could be at this hour. The door opened slowly, and there he was, Ethan, standing in the doorway, drenched from the rain, his expression unreadable. "Mom," he said softly, his voice carrying a weight she hadn't heard in years. Her breath caught. Something in his tone, something in the way he looked at her, told her this wasn't a casual visit. There was something he needed to say, something he had been holding back for a long time. Sarah motioned for him to sit, her hands trembling slightly as she poured him a cup of tea. The rain continued to fall outside, but inside a quiet tension filled the room. Sarah watched her son carefully, trying to read the emotions flickering across his face. He looked older, more uncertain, yet there was a vulnerability in his eyes that made her heart ache. "Mom, I think I made a mistake," Ethan said, his voice barely above a whisper. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. For a moment, she didn't know whether to feel worry, curiosity, or relief. After all these years of distance and silence, he was finally opening up. And yet the words hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. She reached out and took his hand gently. "Tell me," she said, her voice steady but soft. Ethan hesitated, as if the right words were hard to find. And in that pause, Sarah realized something she hadn't admitted to herself. She had been waiting for this moment for a long time. The moment when her son would let her in again, not as a child needing guidance, but as a young man confronting the consequences of his own choices. The rain outside softened to a drizzle, and the house felt warmer somehow, as if it had been holding its breath in anticipation. Whatever Ethan had to say, she knew one thing. Their relationship, fragile as it was about to change. And in that quiet, tension-filled room, hope flickered once more in her heart. As the rain softened outside, Ethan sat across from his mother, stirring the tea in his cup without really drinking it. Sarah watched him, the lines of worry and uncertainty in his face, stirring memories she hadn't visited in years. She remembered the small, ordinary moments that had once filled their lives with warmth and laughter. Moments that had built the invisible thread connecting their hearts. She thought of the summer evenings when Ethan was 10, running barefoot through the garden with a kite in hand, his laughter ringing like music. She had chased him across the yard, pretending to be stern, but secretly thrilled by his energy and joy. The way he had thrown himself into life, so earnest and unguarded, had made her love him even more fiercely. Those moments had been simple, yet perfect proof that closeness didn't need grand gestures, only presence and shared delight. And then there were the quiet evenings at the kitchen table, when homework had spilled across the surface and pencils clicked against notebooks. Sarah remembered how he would lean on her shoulder when a math problem frustrated him, and how they would laugh at small mistakes together. It was in those ordinary, patient moments that their bond had grown strong, solid as the walls of the house that surrounded them. Yet, as Ethan grew older, those memories became tinged with distance. High school brought new friends, new routines, and responsibilities that pushed Sarah into the background. He had smiled, but the smiles had changed. They were more guarded, less spontaneous. She could see the subtle shift, the way he would brush off her questions, the way his responses became brief, almost automatic. It wasn't that he didn't care, she knew that. But life had pulled him in directions she couldn't follow, and slowly, she felt her place in his world shrinking. Despite that, the love between them never wavered. It had transformed into a quiet longing, an unspoken understanding that each missed the closeness they once had. Sarah remembered nights she had stayed awake, listening to the sounds of him moving in his room, thinking about the boy he had been and the man he was becoming. She had worried, of course, about the mistakes he might make, the choices that could hurt him, but more than anything, she had hoped he would always come back to her, even if only in small ways. Ethan broke the silence, his voice soft, almost tentative. "I remember when you stayed up with me the night I failed that big spelling test," he said. "I was so embarrassed. But you just held my hand and told me it didn't mean I wasn't smart. You always made me feel safe, even when I messed up." Sarah felt a lump in her throat. She had remembered that night too, the frustration, the tears, the quiet reassurance that nothing could make her stop loving him. And now, hearing him voice it aloud, she realized that those moments had never truly left him either. "I never forgot," she whispered. "Even when you started pulling away, even when you wanted your own space, I always remembered." Ethan nodded, and for a moment they sat in silence, letting the memories settle around them like a warm blanket. It was in those recollections, the shared laughter, the whispered comforts, the unspoken promises, that they could still feel connected. Yet the tension lingered too. Mistakes had been made, words said and unsaid, choices that had built walls as much as memories had built bridges. Sarah could see it in Ethan's eyes, the longing to reconnect, the regret for the times he had drifted, and the fear that some lines could not be crossed back. But there was also hope. In the flicker of the lamplight on the wooden table, in the way he leaned just slightly closer. Sarah could sense it, a willingness to rebuild what had been lost, to honor the bond that had always existed beneath the surface. The rain had stopped entirely now, leaving behind a calm hush that wrapped the room in stillness. And in that quiet, for the first time in years, they allowed themselves to remember not only what had pulled them apart, but also what had always drawn them together, this shared warmth of a love that had never faded, only waited. The morning sun spilled through the kitchen window, scattering golden light across the worn wooden table. Sarah sat in her usual chair, nursing a cup of tea, her mind still tangled with the memories of last night. Ethan had left just before midnight, leaving behind a quiet promise in his words and the faint scent of rain on his jacket. The world outside was waking up, birds chirping and leaves rustling gently in the breeze. Yet inside, Sarah felt a calm that had eluded her for years. The distance between her and her son, once so heavy and unspoken, now felt thinner, fragile but hopeful. She traced the rim of her cup, remembering his hesitant words, the way his eyes had softened when he spoke of mistakes and regret. It was strange how a single conversation could shift the weight of years. In the past, arguments and misunderstandings had seemed insurmountable. But last night had reminded her of something she had almost forgotten, that love, real and enduring, was patient. It waited for the right moment. It waited for understanding. And it waited for courage. Later that afternoon, Sarah decided to take a walk through the nearby park. The leaves were beginning to turn, painting the paths with gold and amber. She wandered slowly, letting the crisp air clear her thoughts. And then, as if by chance or perhaps fate, she saw him. Ethan was sitting on a bench, sketchbook in hand, focused yet distant, a small crease of worry between his brows. For a moment, neither spoke. The world seemed to pause around them, the children playing in the distance, the dogs chasing balls, the gentle flutter of autumn leaves. And then Ethan looked up, meeting her gaze with a mixture of surprise and relief. "Mom," he said softly, closing his sketchbook. "I didn't expect to see you here." "I could say the same," she replied, offering a small smile. They walked together along the winding path, the silence between them comfortable rather than awkward. Sarah could feel the weight of past mistakes, the tension of unspoken words, but it no longer felt threatening. Instead, it was a reminder of the love that had always remained beneath the surface. Waiting for this moment to surface again, as they passed the small pond, Ethan paused. "I've been thinking about last night," he said, his voice steady. "About the way I handled things. About how I pushed people away when I should have reached out." Sarah nodded. "We all make mistakes. What matters is that we recognize them and try to do better." He looked at her, eyes reflecting both vulnerability and determination. "I want to do better," he said. "I don't want to lose what we have. I've missed this. Missed you." The words were simple, yet they carried the weight of years spent apart. Sarah felt a warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of relief, pride, and love. This was the moment she had been hoping for, the moment when distance could be bridged, when walls could come down, and when hearts could find their rhythm again. They continued walking, talking softly about ordinary things, plans for the weekend, a book she had read, a movie he wanted to see. Each word, each laugh was a brick in the new foundation of their relationship. There were no grand gestures, no dramatic confessions, only the gentle, persistent act of being present for each other by the time they returned to the house. The afternoon sun had dipped lower, casting long shadows across the yard. Ethan stopped at the doorway, turning to his mother. "Thanks for listening," he said quietly, "for understanding me even when I didn't understand myself." Sarah smiled, her heart full. "Always, Ethan, always." And in that moment, as the sky glowed with the soft light of early evening, they both understood something profound. Love is not measured by perfection or absence. It is measured by the courage to reconnect, the willingness to forgive, and the quiet strength to stay present. No matter how long the silence has been, for the first time in years, they felt it real, unspoken, and unbroken. The bond that had always been there, waiting for them to find it again.